Today on the Wire to Wire podcast, we get into UFC on Fight Island 3, Robert Whitaker versus Darren Till. I will tell you how I see this fight going between these two monster middleweights. Also, two legends meet in the center of the octagon for the third time as Shogun Rua faces Little Nog Nogueira in a fight between two absolute legends of the sport. Also, baseball's return. The Giants tonight look to return to World Series form with Cueto on the mound in the return of baseball. Thank God. All right, guys, welcome back. You're watching the Wire to Wire podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Smethers. Today we're going to get into UFC Fight Island 3, obviously, and break down the top 4 fights on that card. Give you some who I'm going to pick and who I've got winning the fights, just in case you want to bet. Last time I was perfect. Last time I made picks. So let's keep that momentum going. And I'm going to also kind of recap the last Fight Island, the two main fights, and the two biggest takeaways I had from that card. Then we're going to get into some baseball because it's fucking opening day. Giants, Dodgers, Yankees, Nationals, and obviously there's some big news out of baseball just today that just broke today that they're probably going to have to make some adjustments because this cannot happen again. And then we're going to get into the NBA, obviously right around the corner, and the playing games are about to start, and Zion is nowhere in sight, obviously dealing with some family issues, but we'll get into that. And then you got the NFL. You know, the players have come out and they want to play. They said it. They had the whole Twitter campaign. They want to play, but the league's going to have to take their health into consideration, which they should have in the first place. So, without further ado, let's hop right in. All right, guys. So let's get into this UFC Fight Island 3 card. Obviously, you've got Whitaker and Till, and then you've got Alexander Gustafsson going against the legend at heavyweight, Fabricio Werdum, Shogun Rua versus Little Nog for the third time. Their first two fights were absolute just wars, and you wonder if these guys can do it one more time at their age. And then you got Carlos Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez. Carla Esparza looked good her last time out. She made some adjustments early in the fight after having really no success early in the fight to pick up a win. Marina Rodriguez, young up and comer, an absolute beast. I'm going to take Marina Rodriguez here just because she's the younger fighter, more well-rounded fighter than Carla Esparza. But if Carla Esparza keeps developing and keeps making changes and improving her stand-up game, she's going to be a tough opponent for anybody because she's a stud when the fight hits the mat. So I got Marina Rodriguez in that first fight. Let's get into Alexander Gustafsson Fabricio Werdum. I'm very interested in this fight for a couple of reasons. Fabricio Werdum's obviously coming off a split decision loss in his return after 2 years against Oleinik, and now he's coming out against the basically one of the best 205ers of all time if, he wasn't in the time frame of John Jones and Daniel Cormier. Fabricio Werdum, he looked out of shape last time. Obviously, 2-year layoff, but he just didn't look himself. Usually he's got pretty good cardio, and last time he didn't show it. So Alexander Gustafsson coming up from 205. He's not cutting weight anymore. He's probably going to come in around 235, 240. Put on a little extra muscle going into heavyweight because that's what you need to do. But you don't want to put on too much because you want to be able to move with the same speed you had at 205. His speed, he's going to have plenty of power. His speed is going to be the make or break for him in the 265-pound heavyweight division. So, will he be able to carry his speed and his cardio into the heavyweight division? That's the biggest thing you're going to have to look at here. Fabricio Werdum, he's a legend, one of the best heavyweights of all time. You cannot deny him that. But at the same time, with the popping in the USADA testing, 2-year layoff, he's 42 years old. Alexander Gustafsson's gonna win this fight, and I think it's gonna be by a finish. He's going to probably finish this with a TKO or a KO. He's just gonna be faster. Better cardio. He's going to be able to just push the pace that Fabricio Werdum will not be able to keep up with, and Alexander Gustafsson will win this fight. But you never know at 265. Fabricio Werdum, before the layoff, was a very well-rounded fighter. Obviously, he's one of the best grapplers in the world, bar none. But his stand-up game was so much improved when he had the heavyweight title, and that kind of didn't see that against Oleinik. So hopefully you get a better form of Fabricio Werdum so you can really get a good test for Alexander Gustafsson in his debut at heavyweight. But I'm thinking that, you know, at 42, a quick turnaround after the split decision loss, I think Alexander Gustafsson mops the floor with Fabricio Verdum at this point in his career. But it's going to be a great fight, and it's a great test for Alexander Gustafsson. All the reports are from former training partners like Brendan Schaub, people that have heavyweights that have trained with Alexander Gustafsson, says he throws around heavyweights like it's no big deal. And I think you're going to see that. I think this is going to put him right in the top 10 in a division that is very top heavy, with the likes of Daniel Cormier and Stipe obviously fighting for the title very soon. And then you've got Ngannou waiting in the wings for the winner of that. Outside of that, there's not really a dominant heavyweight. So Alexander Gustafsson has a chance to get right in the title picture after a short retirement, kind of just, healing the wounds of so many heartbreaking defeats, and just being the bridesmaid and never the bride in the light heavyweight division. I think this is a great move for him and a great time to maybe, capture some gold in the heavyweight division. But Ngannou's no joke, man. And that's who he's going to have to deal with for a long time. Next, you have Mauricio Shogun Rua and Little Nog going at it. These guys had a couple of wars already. They're both, these are two Brazilian, just, old cowboys, man, from the Wild Wild West. They have been gunslinging for a long time, and they're two warriors. And every time they step in the octagon, it's a battle from start to finish. They put on an amazing pace. Obviously, their two other fights were when they were younger, but at this point in their career, I think this is a great fight for the both of them, and maybe a great fight for the both of them to ride off into the sunset. Obviously, Little Nog came out this week and already said, "Hey, this is my last fight. This is my last time I step in the octagon," and I think this is the perfect fight for him to do it. And going up against another legend, and not an up and comer, a guy that's got a name, and in a point where they're both going to, have a lot of eyes on him during the quarantine. The numbers for these ESPN cards have been fantastic during this quarantine, and I really am excited that these two guys get to step in the octagon with the whole world watching. It's going to be an amazing fight. In this fight, though, I've got Mauricio Shogun Rua. Now, if you've been watching the last few fights for Shogun, he's been rocked in pretty much every fight. The chin's not there anymore. And Little Nog, he throws pretty good leather. He's he's got great boxing pedigree. He's great stand-up. Obviously, his ground game is top-notch because he is the twin brother to Big Nog, who's one of the best grapplers of all time, and he trains with him all the time. So his ground game is no joke. But I think the ground game is kind of it's even here. So like the first two fights, you're not going to see it go to the ground much, in my opinion. I think in this fight, though, I think Shogun is going to be able to weather the storm a little bit better than Little Nog and be able to finish. These guys are going to swing until one of them hits the mat and it can't get up. This fight is going to be very quick, fast-paced, and don't expect this to go all 3 rounds. And if it does, you're going to see two very tired men at the end of round number 1, in my opinion. The better cardio is going to win here, and I think that's going to go with Shogun. But it's going to be a great fight, and I'm very excited to watch it. Obviously, with the main event, you've got Robert Whitaker coming off a pretty long layoff after losing the belt to Israel Adesanya, going up against Darren Till, coming off a huge win and a huge debut in the middleweight division against Kevin Gastelum. Obviously, Gastelum is coming off another loss, but at the time that was a big win for Darren Till, and it put him right in the mix at middleweight. This fight right here, especially with the fact that the next middleweight title fight has been announced with Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. It's been announced, so right here, whoever wins is right back in the conversation for the middleweight championship. Robert Whitaker, he took some time off after having a ton of wars back to back to back. The two against Romero, and so many wars leading up to that. This man, he goes out, he throws leather. Darren Till's no different. I think Darren Till's going to shock a lot of people here. He was a big 170 pound, and when he came out to 185, his cardio looked better. He looked less drawn out. He looked just as quick, hit just as hard, and he's a very technical striker. Robert Whitaker kind of is a more of a brawler, and Darren Till is just as big as Robert Whitaker. So this fight's going to be a very even matchup. It's going to all depend on, can Robert Whitaker get inside the technical striking of Darren Till and make this a war? Because Darren Till, he's really good at keeping people off him with his leg kicks and his body kicks. But if Robert Whitaker can get this inside and make this a brawl, this is going to be Robert Whitaker's fight to win. But I think Darren Till, not as active really. He's been out for quite a while just because of the whole Corona pandemic and stuff. But I think Darren Till is going to be a little bit more technical, be able to keep Robert Whitaker at bay and kind of just out point strike him, and maybe land a big left hand. I've got Darren Till by decision, going all 5 rounds, but it's going to be a great fight. So, little recap, hold me to my picks. I got Marina Rodriguez winning against Carla Esparza by decision. I got Alexander Gustafsson finishing Fabricio Verdum in the second round. I've got Shogun Hua finishing Little Nog in the first, and then I've got Darren Till by decision. Hold me to it. Going to be a great card. Nothing else to watch on Saturday, so why not watch some fights? Okay, so let's get into some baseball news. Obviously, it is opening day. I'm recording this on Thursday. It is opening day. I'm so excited to watch the Giants play the Dodgers tonight. Win or lose, it's just going to be nice to have baseball back. Obviously, there's no fans, but there's been some big news breaking today that's going to affect the other game tonight in Juan Soto testing positive for COVID-19. Now, we all knew this was coming, but the problem here and what everyone is kind of worried about is the fact that Juan Soto tested positive on a test that he took 2 days ago. Now, the problem with that is he practiced with the team yesterday. Now, with baseball, with practice at the pro level and stuff, it's a pretty social distanced practice, so people aren't too worried. Obviously, we're going to see if anybody else tested positive, but a lot of these guys have been wearing the masks during the game. If you've been watching the summer camps and stuff, they've been wearing the masks during the games, during practice, keeping social distance. They've expanded the dugouts into the seats because there are no fans, and it's not too worrisome, but the fact that this took 2 days to get a positive test, you need to fix that. If you're going to test these guys, you need the test back as quickly as possible, because this is not good. This is going to have a huge effect for the Nationals going forward, because you don't know how long he's going to be out. He's got to have 2 negative tests in back-to-back 24-hour periods. So it's going to at least be 2 days, and with a shortened 60-game season, every game counts in baseball this year, and that's their 4-hitter. That's their guy that's going to be the bulk of their RBIs. He's going to drive in most of their runs. He's going to be the most important bat in that lineup. So the fact that he's not there tonight against a stacked Yankees lineup is not a good start. But let's stay positive, all right? Obviously, starting up a sport or restarting a sport, it's not going to be a perfect, especially since baseball, they're not doing a bubble. They're playing at their own home stadiums. They have, protocol in place, but at the end of the day, they get to go home. So you can't track these players after they leave the stadium. It's totally up to them and how they live their lives outside of baseball. So hopefully, this kind of wakes up some of the players that weren't taking this serious and go, hey man, it can still happen to me. I need to take this serious because this is my job and this is what I signed up to do this year. But this is going to be a big problem for the Nationals going forward, at least for the near future. But let's get into it. The Giants and Dodgers going at it tonight. Cueto on the mound versus a Kershaw. lot of people were shocked by the fact that the Dodgers didn't start Walker Buehler, who kind of seems that that's going to be their ace for the next few years. But they're going with the old gunslinger in Kershaw, and I think this is kind of just like a it almost happens in every franchise when they have a long term ace. Um, it takes a while to move off. And the fact that Kershaw had a good regular season last year, he pitched fine, but he is coming off a terrible postseason again, or a terrible moment, I should say, in the postseason again. And a lot of people were thinking, okay, it's time to move on to Walker Buehler, but Kershaw's still there. It's a shortened season. You want to get as many eyes on the TV as possible, so we're going to put the biggest name on the mound first game. And it's going against Cueto. The Giants looked pretty good in summer camp. They've got some bench. Obviously, no Buster Posey this year. That's going to have an effect, at least in how the game is called, because Buster Posey does call his own game. Now you're going to have a young catcher behind the plate, most likely Joey Bart at this point. At least you can hope, because of just how good his bat has been and how good it looks. But now you're going into regular season with these guys. These pitchers aren't working on their stuff anymore. They're throwing their best stuff at you, and they're going to give you the least amount of pitches to hit in every at bat. And that's going to be an adjustment for Joey Bart. It's an adjustment for every rookie. But Cueto's healthy. Cueto's on the mound. Hopefully he can have the same, look to him than he had before he hurt his elbow 2 years ago. And he can come out looking like what the Giants are paying him to look like, and really, be the ace that the Giants need with the departure of Madison Bumgarner. But baseball's back, baby. That's all we're talking about here. Obviously, Mookie Betts signing a $380 million extension over 13 years with a ton of new money. He's got the second richest contract in history. Now, here's the problem, and here's what people aren't thinking about. I get baseball is there's no salary cap, so you can pay whatever you can afford as an owner. You can pay these guys, right? But here's the thing, especially with Mookie Betts. You're paying Mookie Betts. That's great. Coming off kind of a down year, though. His hitting numbers weren't where they were 2 years ago, and he's going to a stadium that doesn't carry like it carries in Fenway. So his stats are going to not drop even more, but his power numbers will drop a little bit. Now, he's looked really good in summer camp, but here's the thing that I think you really need to talk about is the fact that you still haven't paid Cody Bellinger. Now, I know I'm a Giants fan, and you might say I'm biased or whatever, but if you just look at this unbiasedly, you cannot deny the fact that you're paying $380 million, the second richest contract in baseball right now behind Mike Trout, and then you're also going to have to pay Bellinger, who is a better player than Mookie Betts. No one disagrees with that. He is the second best player in baseball. So he's going to have to get between $380 million and Mike Trout's number of $45 million a year. So how are you going to afford both those guys and afford a team around them? Because they're going to both need protection. I think this is going to hurt the Dodgers in the long run. It's going to have to. Obviously, you're locking up with this contract. You're locking Mookie Betts up to, I think he's about 40, maybe a little 41. That's a long time, and you want to lock up Bellinger for as long as possible. But how did that work out for the likes of Albert Pujols? Obviously, the last 4 years, his power numbers have gone down. His RBIs have always been up around 100, so he's produced, but he can't run. He can't really play defense. He's kind of a DH now. And in the National League, where they've said multiple times that after this year, they're probably going to go back to hitting the pitcher and taking out the DH. So when these guys start to get older, you're going to have to put them in the field. And in an era where, players don't age as well, because obviously, let's be honest, there's no steroids, so they don't age that well into their late 30s, early 40s, like you had back in the day. This is going to be a problem. It might not be a problem now. It might not be a problem, in 5 years. But with the contract that you're signing, this is going to be a problem after the 5-year mark, because they're going to deteriorate. That's just how the body works. They won't be able to carry the same power, the same contact, especially with a swing like Cody Bellinger, where his swing is so violent and aggressive. He swings to hit nukes. That's what he does. And he has a great average, don't get me wrong, but that swing's going to cause injuries. With every other violent swing in history, it's caused injuries later, and you're going to have to cause adjustments, and you're going to have down periods. With Mookie Betts, I think the problem is going to be the fact that you're going to see a drop off in defense, and in a offense that you're going to have, or a defense that you're going to have Bellinger and Mookie in the outfield with a third guy that's kind of going to just kind of rotate. Defense is going to matter. Obviously, both of them have ridiculous arms, but when their bodies start to break down a little bit, and the years of playing in the league start to break them down, they're not going to be as fast, they're not going to be as quick, and they're not going to read the ball as well. And you can't stick them both. You can't hide them off both in the corners. One of them's going to have to play center. So I think this deal is going to hurt the Dodgers in the long run. But for the next 5 years, you're not gonna see the effect, or you shouldn't see the effect. Maybe Mookie takes a dive. Maybe Bellinger, he develops something wrong with his swing. But I think the problems are gonna come in the 7-8 year mark when both these guys' bodies kind of start to break down. The years in the league start to break down. The more and more tape, the better pitching. Everything's gonna start breaking down, and the fact that you have two fat contracts in your lineup, that's going to hurt your pitching, because obviously you're going to, obviously Kershaw's not long. He's on the back end of his career, so you're going to see him go pretty soon. But you're also going to have to pay Walker Buehler. And if you pay Walker Buehler, who's the rest of your rotation? So it's just, I get it. It's an uncapped league. Money doesn't really matter, but how much money can you afford to pay these guys? How many players can you afford to pay? That's going to be the Dodgers' problem here. That's what's going to come down the pipeline here. But right now, good for Mookie. He gets paid. I'm always happy to see a player get paid. I was surprised it was that much for that long, especially after he had a down year last year. But the Dodgers are hoping that with a new team and more weapons around him, that he with more protection, that he has the same numbers that he had 2 years ago. But for how long? That's going to be the question. It's just longevity at this point. How long is Mookie Betts going to be good? How long can Bellinger be the number 2 guy, or maybe even make a move this year to the top 1? Because Trout had a down year last year too, in my opinion. So obviously good for Mookie. He is a top 10 player in this league, but Bellinger's top 2. So you're going to have to pay him more than Mookie. It's just going to be a ridiculous number on the books. And especially with some talks that maybe the MLB goes to a salary cap for the next few years to recover from this corona. This is going to add some problems to it. But baseball's back. You pray and you hope for the best that we can make it through the 60-game season and get to the World Series without any hiccups. But like you saw with the Juan Soto deal, there will be positive tests. You're allowing these guys to go home and do stuff on their off days and be freer than they are in the NBA. So you're going to have more problems. Obviously, the NBA, you got players breaking rules whether they know it or not. There's been talks that people are struggling to wear masks because they're in a bubble and they don't get it. So I don't think you're going to have a problem there because they're in a bubble. They can't move. So as long as you keep that bubble tight, you should have 0 positive tests, right? But let's move on to the NBA. Obviously, last week you saw Zion had to leave the bubble for a family issue. You hope everything is well. You nothing but good thoughts for him. But at the same time, that's going to hurt the Pelicans' chance 100%. The Pelicans, they depend a lot on Zion, and now you're going. I know this is not a health issue, but this is the second time that the NBA has really had to make adjustments because Zion's not playing. The Pelicans had so many TV games this year, but they were not able to play them. They were able to play them, but they didn't have the same effect because Zion was out for a good portion of the year, right? Now, let's be honest. The NBA put they had the playoff format for a reason, to get Zion and the Pelicans a chance to make the playoffs. Because if Zion and the Pelicans make the playoffs, guess what? That's a ton of money for the NBA via TV revenue. So This is a second time. Hopefully he can get back in the bubble. Obviously it's a I think it's a 10-day quarantine once you leave and come back. So it's going to be some time before he can get back. So hopefully he can get back soon, but most importantly, you hope that his family's okay and everything's okay there. But in a sports aspect, this hurts the Pelicans. They've been playing well. Brandon Ingram led them to a pretty impressive victory. I know it's the warm up games or whatever you want to call it against the Brooklyn Nets, but their ball movement looked good. Ingram really showed out, and they have some great supporting role players. Obviously, Lonzo, Josh Hart. They've got a lot of young talent. It's just how good is that young talent going to be, right? So basketball is coming back, and I will break down when they get into the season. I will break down the seeding and how I think it's going to work out, and I will give you my playoff teams for the playoff push that is coming very rapidly. All right, so some NFL news. So NFL came out and they wanted to. The NFL came out and this huge Twitter rampage came out by the players of them saying they want to play. They want to play. They wanted to make the fans know, made sure it was very clear that they want to play, but at the same time, they want their health taken seriously. Now, obviously, with basketball, there's some physical contact, boxing out. There's a lot of rubbing up and touching, and there's no way around it in basketball, right? They made a bubble. Baseball, a little bit more social distancing. The closest you get is on a pickoff move, catcher to batter. But you can, there's rules in place to make sure that these players are not very close to each other. From everything we've seen, they social distance really well. No more high fives after home runs or nothing like that. They social distance as well as possible. I mean, the outfield is pretty well spaced. The fielders are pretty well spaced. Like I said, batter to catcher is probably the closest you get, or ump to catcher is probably the closest you get to. But besides that, they're pretty well social distance. In football, you cannot avoid this because you have to tackle. So the players are right here in the fact that, okay, we've got this down. We know we want to play a season. They've cut preseason out for the most part, probably by the whole thing, to make sure that every game, every time they go out there and step and make a risk of contracting the COVID virus, that, it's going to mean something 100%. But you have to take it serious because you have to tackle and you have to be violent. And let's not to mention, linemen clash every freaking play. There's literally physical, spit flying, blood flying, everything flying every single play in football. So you have to take this extra serious. I think you're going to see a lot more visors this year, and maybe even some extended visors to kind of cover up a little bit more to make sure that you catch all the spit as much as possible. But there's going to be something. It's the most physical sport out of the three that are returning right now. Obviously, hockey's coming back too, and when that gets a little closer, I'll also break that down to the best of my ability. But football, the players want you to know that they want to play, but at the same time, they want the league to know, like, hey, all right, we got all this other stuff settled. We should have been talking about our health a lot sooner. So that's kind of the biggest news out of the NFL. But, it is what it is. I think it's just all part of getting sports back. Obviously, football wants to have some sort of fans in attendance. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's in the best interest that you play without fans for as long as you see fit. Don't try to rush this back early. The last thing you want is to start a season and for it to just get derailed before it even gets started. So I think you're going to see football without no fans. And honestly, watching baseball, I watched a little bit of the preseason, and watching the preseason basketball that I did last night. Honest to God, I didn't really care there was no fans there. It's not for me. I love going to live sporting events. Hockey, in my opinion, is the best live sporting event there is. I love going to live sporting events. The camaraderie you get with other fans and the joy you get from the other fans. I had the opportunity to storm the field after Stanford beat USC. I touched gave good old number 12 from Stanford, Andrew Luck, a good old pat on the back. That's one of my favorite memories. But at the end of the day, you get, at the end of the day, you get to stay home and not pay, 20 bucks for a beer, 30 bucks if you want a hot dog with it. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't really affect me. I enjoyed it just as much as, watching regular. I'm not focused on the fans when I'm watching a sporting event on TV. So that doesn't really affect me. I know it affects the players. It is going to be weird. Just like when you saw the UFC come out when they did their first couple events, every fighter said the same thing. It is so weird without the energy. But a lot of fighters came out and said, well, it's actually easier to focus right off the get-go because there's no, when on my walk, I don't have to worry about, a fan taking my hat or, touching me or nothing like that. I can just focus on the fight. So I think after like about a week or so, players will get used to it. And it's, yeah, you're going to lose some money if you're an owner, but, at least you get sports back. And I think sports have played in our history such an important part in helping us out of tough times that this is needed. I'm going to say it, this is a necessity for the country as a whole. And a lot of times, a lot of these sports are national. So for the or not national, worldwide. A lot of these sports are worldwide. So, I think for the world as a whole, sports are very important. And I think anything to get back is going to be it needs to be done. Whatever you have to do it just to get sports back. All right, so I kind of skipped over some stuff in the UFC, so we're gonna hop back. Okay, I apologize, but there's so much going on, baseball, football, everything's coming back all at once. Then I kind of, over the last few weeks, I haven't done a podcast in a while, so I want to get back and kind of go over some stuff that I saw in these previous UFC cards. So, we're gonna start with Joseph Benavidez taking a big L. In another chance at the 125-pound championship against Figueiredo. Man, that was hard to watch. I'm a big Joseph Benavidez fan. I've always been a big Joseph Benavidez fan. Growing up in SAC, him being part of Team Alpha Male, you felt like one of your own growing up in that area. Watching that was tough to watch. Obviously, it was the second fight in a row between the two. The first one, Figueiredo wasn't able to make the 125-pound limit, and there was a little controversy with the headbutt, but then he ended him with a right hand. Came back this fight, and it was pretty much like a continuation of the first one without a headbutt. That right hand kept finding its mark. Joseph Benavidez could not stop it. He was dropped 3 times. He had some great submission defense after being dropped multiple times, but that last rear naked choke was nasty. His body was contorted, and he went out. And he went out pretty bad. Figueiredo he's a big 125er. He's a specimen at 125 pounds, and maybe he will be enough to save that division. A lot of people thought if Joseph Benavidez won that fight, that the 125-pound championship would have gone away. And I think it's just it's a matter of time before they get rid of that division because there's just it's not deep. It's not. And a lot of people have trouble connecting with it because of how small the guys are. A person like me, I'm a smaller guy, so I look at this and I get excited. But for the casual UFC fan, 125 pounds is hard to connect with. So I think that division is going to go away pretty quick. All right, next fight I want to kind of cover. Gastelum going up and taking a loss in his last fight. That heel hook by the Joker was insane. That was, it was kind of a slow start. They were feeling each other out. Gastelum was able to reverse the double underhooks and kind of get on top and get a takedown. And instead of getting up like I thought he was and kind of go for the striking, he kind of played the game, and the Joker won with a heel hook. You don't see a lot of heel hooks. Very impressive. And anyone that was kind of thinking like, oh, maybe that was a little early tap for Gastelum, heel hooks are the most dangerous submission in MMA because they're uncomfortable and they hurt a little bit when you're dealing with them. And they're a very hard submission to maintain the control. But when it's deep, it's uncomfortable, and then you hear a pop. and your knee's toast. It's called a heel hook, but it's the torque on your knee, and the last thing you hear is a pop, and that's your ACL, meniscus. That's your knee just getting torn to shreds. So Gastelman tapped at the appropriate time. He came out without injury. Think that's good on him. This is the third loss in a row, and I know you can say he's had the previous two were big fights, Darren Till, and the one before that, Israel Adesanya. But that's three losses in a row, and that's not good for Gastelman. Where Gastelman goes from this, you don't know. But that's a big takeaway for me. That was one I remember, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing is where does this go going forward? Jack Hermansson, where he's going is only up. Obviously, you're going to have to give him a top 5 guy now. But that was an impressive heel hook and a great showing for Jack Hermansson right, in front of everybody. Everyone's eyes on that fight. Great fight. Kind of a shocker if you were following me along as I was going through these fights as the fights were going on Facebook. I kind of posted late and I gave my pick and I said, I got Gastelman in this one. I'm not a Gastelman fan. I think he's overrated, but I didn't think Jack Hermansson was that good. That dude is a stud. He's a finisher. He always looks for a submission, and he's dangerous off his back, as you could tell. You got that off his back, and that's always a huge attribute for anybody, especially in today's UFC. So, big win for Hermansson, big loss for Gastelman. That was a big one. Let's get into obviously the Usman Masvidal. I wasn't able to break this down because I didn't have a podcast. I gave you my picks, and let's be honest, I was perfect on these fights. I had Ribas beating Van Zant. That happened. I had Rose beating Andrade. I thought Rose was going to be able to finish that fight, but Andrade came out and fought one hell of a fight. Rose was able to win. I had Peter Yan. I said he was going to be younger, faster, be able to carry go a lot longer, and he got a TKO in the 5th, and it was nasty. I said Volkov was going to beat Holloway. You could say I got that one wrong because let's be honest, Max Holloway won that fight, but got messed by the judges, and it is what it is. It's called it's happened so many times in the UFC. And then if you had Usman Masvidal looking any other way, especially on 6 days notice for Masvidal, you are crazy and you need to go to the doctor, because that's exactly how I called it. I said Masvidal was going to be able to stop the initial takedowns and get pushed up against the fence. And that's what happened. And you can say what you want about Usman. That was the smarter game plan. He was preparing for a more well-rounded fighter in Gilbert Burns, who has better submissions off his back. He's one of the best grapplers in the world. And so his game plan was probably totally different 6 days before he fought. So now what he's thinking is, I'm going to go do what I do best, and which is wrestle, and I'm going to take away Masvidal's biggest weapon, which is his knockout power. And that's exactly what he did. He wore him down. Masvidal's cardio looked a lot better than I thought, but it was a lot of resting up against that cage for Masvidal. He didn't fight out of a lot of them. He had some success in that first round with his strikes, but from the 2nd to the 5th, Usman controlled that fight, and he did what he had to do to win. It was a good win. Masvidal, it takes a little bit of the shine off him. You have to say. I mean, yes, he's beaten some guys and he's had some fantastic finishes, but you can put an asterisk on almost every single one of them. Askren, starting out, obviously one of the craziest knockouts of all time. Flying knee 5 seconds in. But here's the thing about that. Askren can't strike. I'm not saying it was a lucky shot, because it wasn't. It was a well-planned flying knee, but you see that all the time and guys miss. He just happened to hit the button. Good on him. Great win. But the other thing is, Askren, he's needed a hip replacement for about 4 years now. So it's not the top-end Askren. Then you go to the Nate Diaz fight. Great win. Nate Diaz has never beaten a top 10 welterweight. So this takes the shine off him. Masvidal was controlled for 4 of the 5 rounds, and I think he's probably he's a seventh or eighth ranked welterweight at best. But he's going to have some great fights, and there's going to be big money fights for him. Obviously, he got paid. They renegotiated his contract close to what he wanted. He didn't get everything he wanted, but close to what he wanted. And, you know, he's going to have some big, but I don't think he'll ever fight for the title again. All right. So that's my episode for this week. I will try to get better at doing these every week, but life's life, and stuff pops up. So if I forget, I apologize. I will continue to post on my Facebook page, the Wire to Wire podcast page, as much as possible. Give you questions, interact, shoot me some questions, do whatever you got. But baseball's back, baby, and I'm about to go watch the Yankees and Nationals and be very happy doing it. And then the Giants and Dodgers. And Eric Baldonado, if you're watching this, I got the Giants 6-4 because Kershaw sucks. All right, guys. Have a great week. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week.